All right, here's the review for our test we'll be having Tuesday on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. These are short answer questions. You'll need to look up the answers for and be prepared. Number one, who were the three politicians in the state of Texas that were feuding in 1963, resulting in President Kennedy's trip to Dallas? And please include political positions held by each of the three individuals. Number two, give two examples of the poor treatment UN Ambassador Adlai Stevenson endured during his speech at United Nations Day in Dallas in October of 1963. Number three, what were President Kennedy's plans that were announced by Press Secretary Pierre Salinger on November 1st, 1963? Number four, list the two reasons President Kennedy's aides urged him not to travel to the city of Dallas during his Texas tour in November of 1963. Number five, who was the man responsible to make a detailed inspection of possible hazards along the motorcade route prior to President Kennedy's visit to Dallas? Number six, who was the Dallas police chief who addressed the people of that city on November 20th, 1963 about the upcoming visit by President Kennedy? The next question, who was the congressman that President Kennedy was going to speak on behalf of during his visit to Houston, Texas? And then list three of the four reasons that the presidential protection by the United States Secret Service would be difficult in Dallas on that fateful day of November 22nd, 1963. You also need to be able to explain briefly President Kennedy's agenda for the day of November 22nd, 1963. These questions are all fill in the blank. It's a storyline. I will simply read the storyline and say blank, or you need to fill in an answer of a name or a time. At 7 a.m. on Friday, November 22nd, 1963, President Kennedy visited with his personal secretary, blank, agreeing to meet with a few of her friends in the hallway later that morning. At 8:30 a.m., Kennedy and presidential aide blank looked out a window toward the parking lot where the president would speak that morning prior to the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce breakfast at the Hotel Texas. During President Kennedy's speech at the Hotel Texas parking lot, the president directed Secret Service agent blank to go back to the hotel and ask Jackie to join the president at the head table of the Grand Ballroom. During the Chamber of Commerce speech in the Grand Ballroom of the Hotel Texas, the Texas Boys Choir of Fort Worth performed the song blank for President Kennedy. After the breakfast speech at the Hotel Texas, President Kennedy was presented with two gifts, a blank and a blank. As President Kennedy and Jackie left the Hotel Texas, they stopped to thank members of the Texas Boys Choir and spoke specifically to 9-year-old blank, who stated to the President and Mrs. Kennedy that I'm Catholic. After the breakfast speech at the Hotel Texas, President Kennedy paid his respects to an elderly politician by calling blank to wish him a happy 95th birthday. After landing at Love Field in Dallas, President and Mrs. Kennedy were greeted at the bottom of the mobile staircase by Dallas Mayor blank and his wife, Deary. After Mrs. Kennedy was presented a large bouquet of red roses, she and the president were introduced to blank, age 85, who was a loyal Democrat and stated that she had never seen a president. At 11:45 a.m., the presidential motorcade departed from Love Field toward downtown Dallas, stopping at what time so President Kennedy could greet a group of small children who were waving a sign which read, "Mr. President, please stop and shake our hands." The motorcade continued, and at 12 noon, President Kennedy again ordered the motorcade to stop so he could blank. At 12:29 p.m., as the presidential limousine passes the Dallas County Courthouse on Houston Street, blank turned to President Kennedy and said, "Mr. President, you can't say that Dallas doesn't love you." At 12:30 p.m., 3 shots rang out in blank, changing the course of American history forever. The first shot fired at President Kennedy from above and to the right of the President's limousine. The first bullet entered President Kennedy's back downward at a blank degree angle, traveling through the President and exiting out his blank. President Kennedy immediately lifted both hands toward the exit wound. The bullet then continued, entering Governor Connolly's back at the rear of the right blank. The bullet continued through Governor Connolly's body, shattering his blank and exiting out the right side of his chest. The bullet then struck Connolly at the right blank, shattering the radius bone before burying itself in Connolly's left blank. The second shot missed the presidential limousine and hit the cement curb in front of the triple underpass, with a fragment of cement striking Dallas car salesman blank in the face. The third shot hit President Kennedy in the back of the head. Motorcycle patrolman blank, who was less than 6 feet from the presidential limousine, later described the fatal shot that hit President Kennedy by saying his head exploded in blood. After the shots, Jackie began to climb out the back of the limousine as Secret Service agent blank leaped onto the back of the car and pushed Jackie back down. At 1:33 p.m., Nurse blank answered the fateful phone call at Parkland Hospital and was informed that President Kennedy was on his way. The motorcade reached Parkland Hospital at 12:36 p.m. and Dallas Trooper blank lifted both Governor Connolly and President Kennedy onto gurneys so they could be taken into the hospital. President Kennedy was rushed into Trauma 1, an emergency room at the hospital, and Dr. Blank, who was the first physician to see the President, reported 2 external wounds, no pulse or blood pressure, and the fact that the President's pupils were dilated and fixed. Then the President was next examined by attending surgeon Dr. Blank, who, with the help of Dr. Blank, immediately performed a trach in an attempt to improve the President's breathing. Dr. Blank had established an intravenous line in the President's left leg in the event he needed blood, along with inserting a chest tube into the President. Finally, after physicians tried desperately to save the President's life, Dr. Blank pronounced President Kennedy dead. At 12:57 p.m., Father Blank arrived with an assistant and administered the last rites to President Kennedy. At blank p.m., President John F. Kennedy was officially pronounced dead, and shortly afterwards, blank approached Vice President Johnson, stating to him, "Mr. President, the President is dead." At 1:33 p.m., blank, after receiving confirmation that Lyndon Johnson was back aboard Air Force One at Love Field, announced the death of President Kennedy to the press at Parkland Hospital. And finally, at 3:50 p.m., Dr. Blank briefed the President on the condition of Governor Connolly. That is your test review. The test will be worth 105 points, and it will be next Tuesday prior to the Wednesday before Thanksgiving vacation. A reminder for those that weren't here Friday that your raffle tickets are due to me Monday during the class period so I can get them organized, and also your biography, second biography, is due at the start of the period Wednesday before Thanksgiving vacation. Study hard.